And I think that part of this journey is to make sure that we don't suffer after our parents have left this earth, both personally, emotionally, and financially.
Hi, welcome everyone. My friend Nancy May, who is here to talk about, well, one of those subjects we don't always talk about, and that is what happens when we age and age beyond that point where we can do everything we want to be able to do. And especially when that happens to those people we love, because Nancy went on a journey with her parents and she found that that journey didn't have to be as awful as she thought it was going to be. And so she's going to share that with us as a part of her Pebble. And so, Nancy, thank you and welcome.
Thank you very much, Tracy. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
Thank you. So, your parents came of an age where originally you thought that they maybe needed to live somewhere and have others help them. And so that started out, and they were together, which was a blessing. And they had the funds to do that, which was a blessing. But it didn't stay the way you thought it was going to be, and you had to start making some decisions for them. So let's start there, maybe.
Sure. Well, there's a little twist to that because my folks had been planners and were always cautious about wanting to make sure, in their words, that they were not a burden to my sister and myself. I love my mom and dad, and I would never consider them a burden. But I do know a lot of us who are, I don't know quite, we may not actually want to say that word out loud, burden, but it's exhausting. So my folks had planned to go and move into a care facility to take care of themselves so that my sister and I could live our lives and we would be happily ever after and they would just eventually pass and that would be it. Well, life's not that simple, right?
Yeah.
So they moved into this care facility. Life doesn't always happen the way we want it to, right? And I would say it didn't happen the way my folks expected.
No.
Mom had some early signs of dementia, which we weren't sure what it was. It was depression. Dad would just say, she's not well, let her sleep, let her rest. And so he did. But when they moved to the care facility, things were fine for the first 6 months or so. And then there were other little signs that were happening that I saw long distance. Now, they were in Florida. I was up in Connecticut. So we're a little around 1,200 miles away.
Mm.
And mom and I would usually talk fairly regularly. Well, this didn't happen as often as I used to or thought it would.
Right.
And dad was not a big talker on the phone. But then I was also in charge of their bills. So I'm taking care of the bills and I'm seeing the bills slowly escalate, a little bit here, a little bit there, and being responsible and making sure that they didn't run out of assets. And I certainly didn't have millions of dollars to add to their pool. I wanted to make sure that things were kept manageable. And I would always question and call down to the care facility and ask every little nickel and dime.
Good for you.
I want to make sure that at least if they were being billed, that mom and dad were getting their money's worth. But one of the tall tale or the tale signs was mom would not go down to get a meal at the dining room. And so I was being billed, $6 here, $8 there, $12 there, depending upon the meal that was being served. And that was just to have a meal walk down to her room. Well, dad would take it down, but we were still being charged anyway. Things
That's
happen. This is one of the things that I warn people about to say, please, if you're going to have your parents go into a care facility, let's sit down and review the entire contract so you know exactly what you're dealing with. And more often than not, those contracts don't tell you what's not included in them. So we learned the hard way. The cost of my parents' care grew from initially $1,500 a month, which was not a lot at the time. This is now about 13, 14 years ago when they first moved in. And it was I call it the starter special.
right,
You pay
right.
the down payment, and then they hook you on saying, Well, there's only one room left. If you don't take it now, it's gone. Well, that's also another fallacy, depending upon the facility, but most of them have plenty of room because it is a revolving door.
Or
No pun intended.
I
They need to
understand.
constantly replenish. But the cost of their care then went to $3,500 a month, which was what it was supposed to be. And then it continued to grow from there, $600, $800, $1,200 to $30,000 a month. Now, the interesting part is that is not an unusual number.
That's just
We
and
are
that's
told,
there's just so
right?
many people
It's
that
huge. It's
big, right.
huge.
Most people are at that age are living on an annuity and maybe Social Security, and that number is stifling.
Right. And so care facilities are often sold like cruises or hotel rooms. It's beautiful. You're going to the resort. Life is wonderful. Even if you have money for a continued care facility, which is where you start from dependent to then assisted and you graduate up to nursing, people don't understand that these facilities they think they're going into, they're being cared for. They are not medical facilities. We think they are. We
Right.
think that they're truly care, but what does the term care mean?
Right.
So there's this big fallacy that's out there that's been baked into the marketing of a generation that is aging quickly. And the population, I think it's now by 2035, there will be more people over the age of 50 than there are under the age of 50 here in the United States alone.
Wow. So you obviously learned a lot of this on the job, as you might say.
Yeah.
And now you've gone from to 30,000, which is what, a 2,000% explosion of your costs. So,
$360,000 a year. Yeah.
and you don't feel like obviously that maybe she's getting the care if she's not you and interacting, and she's not even going down for dinner. So, what did you choose to do then?
Well, my dad was not cognitively impaired, and Dad and I had a good relationship, and he was the one who was always making sure I knew where things were just in case. It's kind of Dad's a planner. And so what happened is I flew down to Florida and sat him down and said, Dad, let me lay out what's going on. And a little nervous in sharing, but even more nervous about not sharing and saying, let's figure this out. I kind of knew what we had to do. However, I didn't want to make I will say a drastic or a big decision without him feeling involved because that was home for them now. You know, it's
Right.
like pulling the rug out from underneath your folks and telling them that they're going to be homeless when they're not really. But that sense of fear of not knowing what's next is something none of us will ever want to deal with, right?
No, no. Well, especially if he was cognitively there. It's
Oh yeah.
one if they're not capable, but if he still was all there, you definitely would want him to feel a part of the process.
Right. And to help him feel that he's still viable and needed, which he was to the very end. So we made a decision to move. And he said, Can we go now? It's like, no, we have to give 30-day notice, which is what most of these facilities have in their contracts. So, and actually, the head nurse, who I referred to as Nurse Ratchet, for a variety of reasons, and I used to joke and call myself, they didn't know it, but I called myself the Wicked Witch from the North because I would fly down with all the questions,
I
go
love that.
right on my JetBlue broomstick down to Tampa, Florida,
Good for
from
you.
yeah, New York, and Westchester, Connecticut, that area and dealt with things. But we looked at a lot of facilities between Connecticut and Florida and what to do. And with the support of an attorney and financial advisor, decided that, a place to eventually move to. And I took Dad to some that were not really uplifting in style, but I didn't know what we were going to walk into with each situation. It's like house hunting, right? You don't know what you're going to walk into until you smell like the dog pee in the corner.
Oh, yeah.
Or maybe you're lucky and you smell the apple pie baking in the oven.
Right.
but there was a lot of the dog pee in the corner smell from some of these
The flyers
facilities.
can be deceiving.
Yeah, 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 and not just Florida, it's everywhere. I say these facilities are popping up everywhere we look like mushrooms on a wet day. Doesn't matter what state you're in. So we
And from
found a
the
place.
outside, they all look like little Victorian with their wraparound, pip
It's in the rockers in the front and
but
yeah,
that's
yeah.
not necessarily what they are in the inside.
No, not I mean, maybe, but it's so much the quality of the paint, I say, or how clean the carpet is. It's also who's there and what's going on and how do they care about people? Do they care is the thing. Do they have enough staff members? What happens if somebody needs help and they're 20 apartments down the hall and there's only one person there to get mom up off the floor?
Right.
So there are a lot of questions that we have to sort of another. But we moved, we found another place. And by the way, mom had lost about 50 pounds in that first facility because she wasn't eating, right?
Oh my gosh, yes.
The good news is at the new place, it was bright, it was sunny, mom felt better, and she put weight back on and she looked great and was mentally doing better. She had her issues, but it was okay. And dad started to lose weight about a year or so later because he was a big guy. He wasn't fat, but he was a tall, husky man and needed decent food. And a slice of pizza at lunch is not a meal for a guy who's around 200 pounds and in his late 80s.
Yeah, not cutting it.
No, and he didn't have the greatest teeth. So no pun intended, into a slice of pizza when your teeth aren't that great
No.
isn't good either. So we moved there. Send from a place. I was looking around. I came back down, looked at a bunch of other places, and went to a facility. Well, it wasn't really a facility, it was an apartment complex that for like 55 plus. It was kind of like the concept. And there was a young kid that was there and said, well, we're brand new, but we're all filled up. And I was telling him what I was doing. I had fired the agency, I had my aides, things were going on. It was basically an apartment facility that we had in this care facility that we managed our own environment. And he said, you're doing everything right. Why don't you just rent a house on Zillow? And I thought, brilliant. So, with the support of my lead aide at the time, I said, would you be willing to do this? And she said, sure. I said, I just need to make sure that whatever we rent is going to be functional for you, the aides, so that they could do their job well and safe for mom and dad. We found a place. They moved in, and that was great for about 2 years until that went on the market. We decided to try and buy it, well overpriced. They didn't want to negotiate on price. It didn't pass inspection. So we had to move again. At this point, I said, excuse me, screw that. We're not renting anything else. We're going to see what we can buy. So, talking to a financial advisor, talking to the accountant, looking at realtors in the area, networking down where mom and dad lived, and figuring out what's the best course of action. Called my sister in Oklahoma, said, you meet me on such and such a date. Here's the airline ticket. We have 10 days. We're going to find a house and buy it. And she's like, really? And I said, yep.
I have a feeling when you set your mind to something, things happen.
Sometimes, yes, they go the way you want them to. And times they don't go the way you want them to, and you fix them, right? So we looked at about 40 houses with several realtors and ended up with the final one. I took my sister to, and I said, I think this is it. Called my lead aide, another lead aide, because I had fired the other one, who another story for another episode. And I said, Millie, I need your advice. Come take a look at this. Is this going to work for you? Let me know. Because if it did, again, if it didn't work for her, my lead aide, and my others, she was the one who would know, then it wasn't going to work for mom and dad.
Right, right.
So I take her in. My sister's with me. She walks over to the kitchen and she hugs the lanai. And I said, okay.
This is the one.
I
Because if
kind of
she's
thought,
happy, then she's going to do well by them, right? So
and her eyes lit up and she smiled from ear to ear and no words came out. And I said, okay, we found home.
That's amazing. Well, and so it was the final place.
That was their final, literally final place to live until those till those final breaths.
Oh,
And the gals that worked with us, we had a team of 6 to 8 on average aides that worked 24/7, not all at once, but I understand that you have to be respectful of those that are helping you, especially if it's long distance, that they have a life too, and never rely on one person because you didn't want to give your life up for your parents. Why would you expect anybody else to give their life up for your parents too,
amen to that.
right?
That and the things that I really stress the Pebble is that kind of attitude, which is if we're doing right by ourselves, then we have the space to do right by others. And so that attitude, which is that you knew that you couldn't be there full time, but you wanted to do well by them. And you gave that generosity to the people that were there for them. And so you knew then they would be able to do right by them, like that whole
Mhm.
attitude of that kindness rolling. And so you could have faith in them to do their best for them.
Respect and appreciation. And when that is broken, you break the ties.
Yes.
I mean, to understand that not every situation is going to stay the same, and that's okay, right?
Right. No, definitely, especially when it's your parents and you have to be able to have that respect. For sure, you have to be able to trust those people but understanding that and in having that respect for them and that
Mhm.
kindness and generosity of spirit for them. I just feel like so we have these jobs where we have these high expectations of people,
Mhm.
whether it's caring for our elders or our children, and yet we don't treat them with the
Mhm.
elevation that they should get when they're caring for our dearest people. So I just really wanted to point that out, how wonderful I think that was, that you saw that they are full time, so wouldn't I expect them to need some time away and some break and date nights or whatever, that's a
Right?
that's a part of humanity, and that would refill their well to be able to do better for your parents. So I just thought that was really beautiful.
Yeah.
So
Well, thank you. And tried to always make sure that they had all the tools and resources that they needed because I wasn't there hands-on. So understanding what they were going through the course of the weeks and every other week I'd send checks down, pay their, and with check I would send a personal note and a card to say thank you in some way, shape, or form and try and recognize something they had done in the course of that time to say 2 things. One, to let them know I'm watching,
yeah,
literally and figuratively at times. So just because I'm not there, sight
know
does
what
not mean
they
out of
do.
mind. That's right. Nancy, like, I see the crystal ball.
Well, you are the witch, right? You can fly
That's
down
right,
and
that's
talk
right.
to you. No, but I'm sure that it was also appreciated that they
They
saw or
were,
seen.
really surprised because a number of them said that they kept all of those after mom and dad had passed and how those notes made them feel important. And it was important for me to know that they felt cared for too.
That's
And
beautiful.
I would say maybe not cared for, but appreciated
Appreciate,
is
yeah,
maybe a better
definitely.
word.
Well, you took all these lessons that you learned, that affected you and moved you. I mean, like I don't, hard for me to talk about because I don't want to think about this, but my parents are moving into their
Mhm.
their later 70s and we've
Yeah.
had some health issues. So, I said nobody wants to think about it. No one wants to talk about it, but it's the truth that is not. I may be at the earlier part of it, but it's an arc. It only goes one
Mhm.
way, right? So appreciate you sharing your journey, and you obviously have learned a lot, and you've taken this journey and you've shared it, and you've made a career from it. And I just thought I'd like you to share a little bit about how you've helped others.
Oh, much that people will take and some people won't take anything. They'll listen, but they don't do anything. I said, it is our greatest personal commitment is probably the best thing because it's only by inaction that we live with regrets later on.
That's true.
And I think that, this journey is to make sure that we don't suffer after our parents have left this earth, both, and financially. And so just the other day I was on a call with somebody, and within I think probably about 45, 50 minutes, we had a list of things that would save them easily close to $20,000.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, definitely. And what could be done with that to bring more enjoyment or whatever, families that could be 5 months of what they live on.
Sometimes it's not even about money. There was a gentleman who I was referred to probably 2 years ago, and a friend had said, "Would you talk to?" I'll use the name Joe. So I talked to Joe, and his wife had and had gotten to the stage where she had forgotten who he was and was frightened by him. So
Right.
she was frightened to have him in the house. She didn't know who this strange man was. They were of means, and they had another house about 3 hours away.
Oh, yeah.
So every time he walked into the house, she would scream and she would get afraid. And the
Oh,
aides that were working with him had said that he should move out. Now, this is hard. So I said, "So what did you do, Joe, at the time?" He says, "Well, I moved out to our other house." But his heart ached because he didn't know how to be there for her for two reasons. One, to make sure that the quality of the care was still good from those aides, so there was no way for him to keep an eye on that. And the other was trying to rekindle that love that he had for his wife and the relationship that he had.
yeah.
So there are a couple of ideas, just to make sure things are going on, the relationship with the aides, how the conversation is going. I say managing the team. The other was to try and reestablish the life with his wife. So I said, "Okay, she know who you are, but she's still female. And whether you're male or female, we all love to be loved and flattered, right?"
Right.
He sent her flowers on occasion, or maybe weekly if he wanted to, and
Right.
start sending her love letters.
Yeah, that's lovely.
And if nothing else, he could share his love with her in a different way.
I think that's beautiful. I think that's absolutely beautiful. Well, what do you feel like has been the greatest joy that you've gotten from this? I mean, it's had to have had its tough days,
Mhm.
but
Sometimes, right?
I,
Because you
you know,
guys, right?
but has anything from the lessons you've learned really, brought you joy?
Oh, many, 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 many lessons. So, I think that knowing that I did well and did the best I could, right? But there are still things I think I could have done better. It's really hard not to beat yourself up and say, well, woulda, shoulda. There are those.
I think
But
you've
even going through things like I would send down once a week to my dad and to my mom, but predominantly my dad because my mom was not as interested. As a kid in camp, my mom and dad would send me letters at camp, right? So as they got older and moved into a care facility, they always were interested in what I was dealing with, but time on the phone is fleeting. So it's just time on the phone. It doesn't do anything. So I decided that I would create a different form of letters from camp. It was letters from Nancy in the course of her day, or the week. So every week I would send down a letter with basically a newsletter. I took photos on my phone and I would put them into a Word document and I put little stickers on them. And it was just a documentation of what happened in the course of that week to share with mom and dad. And the aides would read the letters to him because dad's sight wasn't that great. And mom wasn't able to read with her sight because of the TIAs she was having, but they could hear. And dad loved seeing those. Well, the aides actually kept every single letter and put them in a three-ring binder and would read them to him. So I mean, I kept the letters in my computer either way because I didn't, but I've got this, ring binder that's like this thick, from Nancy,
I think
that
that's lovely, and you'll have that forever. I think that's
just the fact that they
it
kept
was
them,
a yeah,
right?
that's beautiful. Well, thank you so much. Nancy, for sharing that. I think that, you know what, I feel inspired. I feel like I could do that for my parents and mother-in-law who currently live together right now, for us to send to them because I know they miss us. I mean, and even in that state, but I almost feel like I should do that because I'm always on the phone taking pictures. So
But
I
there's
feel
nothing like getting
inspired.
something in the mail, right? And it doesn't have to
Yes.
cost, although a stamp is now like it's 75 cents, so, you know.
Still, very little cost. So, well, thank you for sharing your journey. You are absolutely a beautiful example of the pebble, because it's the little things that build up that really just change the world. So I appreciate you
You're welcome.
and thank you for being part of the pebble today.
Thank you.
And I'm sure my audience is thanking you too.
Well,
So
and I just one last thing is just I say make every day count, and
a
that's
hundred
that's
percent.
it.
You don't, get a certain amount, and so you've gotta make the most of each one.
And it can be just a tiny little memory, that's all that matters.